We appreciate everyone. This came up probably in pretty short order. It's like, this wasn't on my calendar 2 weeks ago. We appreciate you making the time. I hope that everyone has some idea what we're talking about, and if not, in 15 minutes it'll be pretty clear. We sent out a few messages that one of the things that has been quite challenging is getting payroll charges into the right departments. I was in.
You have to be even louder, Alan.
Louder?
Yeah. For the backup, people in the back of the room.
Okay, for those who have hearing aids, please turn them on. If you don't have a hearing aid, please get one. No, no, that was a joke. I'm only kidding. Please don't. Oh, gosh, yeah.
We'll talk later.
I'll be in John's office this afternoon. So nice working with all of you. But I was in Steve Hafin's office and we were working through a new report that hadn't been released yet. And I pull it up and I said, Steve, you can see your whole organization. Isn't this wonderful? And he says, why do I have something from dance in my organization? I'm like, well, that's the second thing I wanted to talk to you about. So there has been a team and they'll introduce themselves, but we so appreciate the work that has been happening collaboratively between the HR teams and the finance teams so that we can address getting charges in the right place. You'll hear some more tomorrow those are going to be in the finance business partner training, the correction that was done late last week and how far that went and what still needs to be done. So that is an introduction. We do appreciate you being here. This is going to be collaborative, right, Molly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Which means you can ask questions, but you can't throw anything, right, Molly?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Yes.
All right, so we're gonna start off. We've asked Whitney Jensen to say a rope.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for this day. We're grateful for the opportunity that we had to go to devotional and for the opportunity to work here at BYU. We're excited as this new school year starts. We pray that we can support the students and the faculty and staff as they begin this new year. We pray that we can have the Spirit to be with us, to lead us and guide us in our work. And we love you, Lord, and pray for these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
All right, without further ado, Molly, your training.
Okay, we'll take it. For those of you who are sitting at here's the next one. Who are sitting at one of the computers, if you want to log in, you are welcome. I always welcome you to go to workday.byu.edu/sandbox. I'm going to offer two disclaimers. Pretty straight, right? To begin with, one is I will be demoing some things in Sandbox. Do not be alarmed. We have moved things around, added things that don't really exist, taken terminated employees and brought them back. If you're looking at that thinking this is all wrong, it's because we've been messing around with it for demo purposes. So don't be alarmed, especially if you're Gina Nichols or anyone in that department. We've messed around with employees. So just know the information you're seeing is there for demonstration purposes. It's not real live data. The second thing I wanted to say at the beginning is I recognize that within this group, we have various levels of expertise when it comes to costing allocations, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Some of you are pros. You could be up here teaching and probably do a better job than me. Maybe it's my loud voice, that's why, I don't know. But some of you are expert. Some of you may be in the camp of, I don't even know what that is, Molly. What's a costing allocation? And hopefully many of you are somewhere in between. We're going to talk today and hopefully can provide information that will be helpful for those of you who don't even know what a costing allocation is. And for those of you who are totally expert, it'll be a really good review. So I understand we're kind of that, this crowd is representing that spectrum of expertise. If you have questions, don't hesitate to ask them. I am firmly of the belief that if you have a question, there are 20 other people in the room with the same question who just don't dare speak up. So please ask it because it will be helpful not just to you, but likely to other people in our audience today. So without further ado, the agenda, we didn't really do an agenda, but let me tell you what we're going to be reviewing today. And we're just going to be talking about costing allocations, what they are, how they fit within the scheme of work tags, and how we decide where someone gets paid and priorities. We're going to show you where to see all this information. And when I say where to see, it's where your HR business partners can see. If you can't see as a finance business partner, that may be something that you're requesting security for down the road, or that you go to your HR business partner and say, hey, can you pull this information for me? So we're going to talk a little bit about where to see this information within Workday. And then we're going to talk about inheritance, because this is the root cause of many of the problems that we're seeing and that we're having to correct within Workday. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll do a little demo on how to edit or add costing allocations so you can see it in action. And then last, fingers crossed we have time, Molly doesn't talk too much, we'll have time to talk about some reports that are available within Workday that will facilitate you being able to see all of this information, not just on a one-off basis, but actually whole soup orgs or whole organizations all at a time. Did you have a comment?
Just a quick, you mentioned finance business partners being able to see these costing allocations.
Yeah.
Making requests. Don't make them yet. We're already working. This is on the roadmap, so we can either through the UI or report give you the finance business partners visibility into the costing allocations. The same way that the HR business partners. But
That's Chad's way of saying, don't everybody leave here today and submit a health
I
case.
see people opening cases, right?
They are on it. They're on it already. So just know it's in process. Thank you. That's gonna save you some health cases down the road. So first thing first. What even is a costing allocation? Now I'm going to talk about where this fits within the grand scheme, but just a general overview of costing allocations. This may sound repetitive, but it's a way within a Workday of distributing costs or allocating those costs or expenses to different kind of driver work tags. And we do that so that we make sure that our reporting is accurate, which has been an issue. What are the situations where you would add a costing allocation? Again, I'm going to talk more about these, but there's really only two, maybe two and a half, but two main reasons you would add a costing allocation to a position. And that would be if the position is funded by a gift, grant, or project, or if the funding for the position needs to be split. And we have both of those situations. We have a lot of positions on campus that are funded by gifts or grants. We have a lot of situations, maybe not as many, but we have some situations, particular departments that split the funding of their position. It might be, in fact, I recently saw an email from an HR BP. There was, I want to say it was a dining position, but someone had agreed to pay for half of it. Costing allocation is a way you can do that, where you can say, hey, athletics is going to pay for half and student life is going to pay for the other half of this position. So those are the situations. If you do not have one of those situations, there should not be a costing allocation on that position. And we'll kind of, again, we'll demo some of this, but I just want to set the stage for this is what we use costing allocations for. If it's not this, there shouldn't even be a costing allocation. So this pyramid here is giving you an idea of how Workday, when it comes to costing or which work tags are really the final say on how someone is getting paid. At the very top of that is payroll input. So the payroll office, if they put something directly into the system, it's gonna trump everything else. It doesn't matter what else is in there. Payroll kind of gets the final, they get the final say. If they put something directly in, that's it. If they don't, which they don't in 99.99% of the cases, then Workday's gonna kind of work through this hierarchy to say, okay, well, then where do we pay this from? Your 5,000 salaries, that's where the salary expense shows up, right? On the general ledger, I'm looking at Alan or any of our finance people, salary, John is giving me a thumbs up. What work tags are gonna show up next to that? So it's gonna look next at time tracking. So when someone's clocking in, they can say, hey, I'm assigning these hours to this project. So that's gonna be the next thing it looks at. Then after that, it's gonna say, okay, is this a special payment, a contract? Like period activity pay would be entered in for a contract. We also use period activity pay for supplemental pay for exempt full-time employees, actually exempt not full-time employees too. One-time payments like awards fall into this category. When you enter in period activity pay or a one-time payment, you're able to select a costing override. Many of you have done this, especially on supplemental pay. You do it almost all the time, where you need to select a costing override. If you have, then Workday is going to work through this pyramid. It's going to say, oh, there's a costing override for this period activity pay. I'm going to use those work tags. If there is not, it's going to go down to this next level and say, is there a costing allocation on the worker position? Now, on the worker position means, hey, I'm Molly Craighead. I work in compensation. If they put a costing allocation on the worker position, then that means so long as I'm employed here, that's where my salary is going to be expensed. But as soon as I leave, then that costing allocation goes away with me. That is opposed to that next one down, which is a costing allocation on the position restrictions. If you have a costing allocation on the position restrictions, then it's like we're putting that costing allocation on position number 000352. I don't know what my position number is, whatever it is. And when I leave, that costing allocation is going to remain. So whoever gets hired into my place, that costing allocation is going to default for that person too. So it's going to look and say, hey, is there a costing allocation on the worker position? If not, then it's going to look and see, is there a costing allocation on the position restrictions? And if not, then it's going to say, okay, what are the default organization assignments for this position that were created when the position came to be? So this is a really good screen. We're going to send out this presentation to have the recording. I'd recommend hanging on to this. So if there's a question down the road, you can say, oh, where in the hierarchy is this? And okay, oh, that's why it's getting costed that way, because this one is trumping that one. And you can kind of see how that's going to play out. I'm going to show you where all of these appear so that this doesn't seem just like abstract concepts. But let me show this to you in a little bit different format, just to reinforce this idea of this hierarchy. So when we create a position, we have to put in the position restrictions. The position restrictions are things like the job profile. What type of worker is this? Is this a job profile? It's a student worker 3. It's a student employee, not staff, not faculty. It's part-time, not full-time. Their scheduled weekly hours are 20. It's where we put in all the information related to what the position is. That's the position restrictions. When we create that position and input those position restrictions, Workday automatically kicks off a task to add organization assignments. The organization assignments are things like the company, BYU, the cost center, CC 1012, whatever. The activity, if there is one. The hiring office, is it the staff hiring office, the student hiring, it's faculty? the program, the class. All those things, is it FICA exempt or not? All those things are part of the organization assignments that get assigned to that new position that's been created. That's kind of that base layer every position's gonna have. And that's why on that pyramid, it was on the bottom. If nothing else, it's gonna have that. So then we have this brand new position, we hire someone into it. When we hire the person, and this is kind of going back to when we were training for that Workday implementation, and you heard those presentations about the seats and the people sitting in the chairs. Do you remember that? The chair was the position, and the person hired into it would sit in the chair for a while, and then when they moved someone else, the position restrictions are that chair. The person, that's the position worker. When we hire someone, now we have kind of these two elements. We have the person, and then we have that underlying foundational chair. So with those, the organization assignments that were made when the position was created, those are going to feed up to the position. They're already on the position restrictions. They're going to feed up to the position, the person who's hired. They'll be associated with that worker position also. So if you do have a case, and I'll say, hey, we are going to pay this for this position using a gift. And whoever sits in that chair, whoever we hire, we want to pay them out of this gift. Then you may assign a costing allocation to the position restrictions. And that way it'll carry over from person to person. If you say, you know what, actually, we're hiring Cindy Henderson, my best friend from 3rd grade. We're hiring Cindy Henderson into that position, and we're going to pay her with this grant because she has this expertise. She's going to be doing research in this area that can be paid for by this grant. But when Cindy leaves, the next person isn't going to have that same, we don't want to pay that person with the grant. So I could just put a costing allocation on the worker position. Now I could do both. We'll talk about scenarios where you want to do both, but those are the situations. Costing allocation on position restrictions, I want it to continue. Costing allocation on worker position is just for the person sitting in the chair. Okay, and then we talked about if we have a position. So I like to use student workers a lot. I know we have a lot of student employees that are paid with gifts and grants. If you have a grad student, they're on contract, they're being paid through period activity pay. When you go to enter in that contract or that period activity pay, you'll have that opportunity to add in a costing override, which will say this is where the period activity pay needs to come from. And then, of course, we talked about the time tracking piece. If I'm recording time and I'm assigning a project to that or something, that's going to be at the top. So once again, how was Workday going to pay this person? Well, they're going to look and see if there's any of that time, payroll inputs, time tracking. If not, it's going to look at that period activity pay assignment and say, is there a costing override? If not, it's going to say, is there a costing allocation on the position worker? If not, is there a costing allocation on the position restrictions? And if not, well, then what are those default organization assignments? And that's where the person's pay is going to come from. Those are the work tags that are going to be used. So what does this actually look like? This is where you can get on your screen. You can follow along. You can just watch however you want to do this. And I'm going to actually pull up a Workday. Now I am proxied as an HR business partner because I want to make sure that all of our business partners can see what I see. This is perfect because we're using Rick West. Some people in his support. His daughter and my daughter were on the same rec league soccer team at one time. I'm going to look up this person right here, Eliza Pinniger. Now, I don't even think she's from this department. I think when we unterminated her, we moved. So this is what I'm saying about the fake information. Just know this is not real. But if I were looking at Eliza Pinniger and I'm the HRBP, she's in my support, there's a couple different ways I can see some of the things we just talked about. First off, if I click on the position, I'm just going to open this in a new tab so you can see. This is gonna show me the position information. So everything that's on the position, related to Eliza, it's showing me those organization assignments, it's showing me the soup org. It's gonna show me, job profile, this is adjunct faculty. It's gonna show me all this information about the position. If I wanted to see the position restrictions, I could click on this, or if I were back at that profile page, if I clicked the related actions next to the position and went to position and view position restrictions, again, I'm just gonna open this in a new tab. Then I could see, before Eliza ever came to be, this is what was set up. What still is set up on those position restrictions. So I can see the class, I can see the company, the default organization assignments, other things related to this position. Now, as with many things in Workday, there's multiple ways to get to this information about those default organization assignments. I can look at the position or position restrictions, it's there. I can also click on this job tab and go to the top menu where it says organizations. And it's gonna show me that same information, right? The class that was assigned, the company, BYU, the cost center. I can see the cost center hierarchy, the fund, the hiring office, the program, all that information from that job tab on the left. Now you're saying, okay, so does this one, going through the thing here, does this have period activity pay? Well, she's adjunct faculty, so probably yes, that's how we pay adjunct faculty. So if I go to the compensation tab, then I can see current period activity pay. So I go to that menu at the top, click on current activity pay, and I can see what her current period activity pay is. And this is just doctored up. You can see testing class. If I scroll over, I'm going to see whether or not there's a costing override. On this one, there is. So I can click on that costing override. If I do that, it's going to show me where that period activity pay, where that contract is going to be paid from. These are the work tags that have been input. 100% of that period activity pay is going to be charged to cost center 10130, gift 00463. That's fund 29. That's how that's gonna pan out. Now, if Eliza did not have period activity pay, and this were an hourly position, she was being paid another way, or if she has period activity pay, but I go over here and there is no costing override. Well, then where do I look next? What's next on the pyramid? Testing memory here, people.
Worker as position?
Okay, the worker position costing allocation. So now I've got to look and see, okay, there's not going to be any payroll inputs. I've looked at the period activity pay. There is a costing override here, so the story would end there. But if there weren't, then I'm going to go down that pyramid and I'm going to look to see if there's a costing allocation on this. Where do I see if there's a costing allocation? Where's my experts in the room?
Pay.
Oh, Lisa, I know you know.
Go down and pay.
All right. Okay, I'm going to come down here to the pay tab. When I click on pay, then up here at the top, sometimes depending on your security, you might have more things on this menu. I've just got costing allocations. So great. I can see on this position, there is a costing allocation on the worker position. Okay. So I'm gonna say, all right, if there's not a period activity pay, if there's not a costing override, then the next thing I'm looking at is this. So on this, I can see her position, Eliza's in. Here's the work tags associated with that. So whatever was showing up otherwise, where it's actually going to get paid is here from this activity, this fund, this cost center, this gift. Those are the work tags that are going to be assigned to her pay. If I want to see how that differs from the default, if I go here to the top, I can see those same default organizations. It's the same thing I saw on that job tab where I went to organizations or when I was looking at the positions. These are the defaults. So if there is no costing allocation, this is where the salary is going to be charged to. So period activity pay, nothing there. Then I'm going to check costing allocations. They'll be listed here, nothing there. Then it's going to be these default organization assignments. That makes sense. Any questions at this point? One in the back.
So she's got two costing allocations there.
Okay, she just has the, oh, yes, sorry, I just didn't scroll
Wondered if
down.
you could
Thank-
maybe,
No, I just didn't scroll down. You know what? I almost need to, I wonder if I can. I'm gonna shrink it a little. That'll make it easier for me. Yes, thank you. There are two. Okay, this is even better example than I thought. So we have, I'm gonna look here. This is gonna tell me what type of costing allocation it is. So the worker position, that's higher up on the hierarchy, right? And then the next one down is a position restriction. That's the next down. So this is going to be the costing allocation that sticks with the position, whether Eliza's in it or not. This worker position one up above, that's gonna be what's charged so long as Eliza is in it and we're in between these dates. Okay? If this were Eliza's paycheck in September, it's going to be charged to these work tags here. These are the work tags that are going to be associated with that expense.
Molly,
If this were, yes,
we had a really great question back here. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Steve.
Steve. He caught something when he was looking at this. He said, how did you fit an activity on that row? And the answer is, we will see. There is actually errors on this costing allocation and somebody already caught it, but she's gonna get into it with the inheritance issue.
absolutely, yes. Good thinking. Skipping ahead. So if we are talking November, if I haven't extended this position, this worker costing allocation, then when it comes to November, if I put in more period activity pay that doesn't have a costing override, then it's going to come down to the position restrictions. And those are gonna kick in because in November, the worker position costing allocation will have ended. So it's good to look at these dates too, to kind of see how those relate. Okay. Question?
Yeah, Molly, great background and helpful. There are probably a few of my finance colleagues that can't see this, but I can't see any of it. And you'd say, well, that's a security issue, and Chad addressed that, we're working on that. And I think we're gonna address this later on, but how do we know then that we're getting the right work tags in either whether that's the organization setup or in the costing allocation, whether that's position or person? How do we know that we're getting those right?
Excellent question. We will get to all of those.
Email earlier.
Yes, we will get to all of those. The really quick answer is something's default. So we'll kind of see how those defaults play in. You've got to be careful not to mess with the defaults because you mess with the defaults and then we've got a problem. The other is we've got some really great reports that we, fingers crossed, we'll have time to talk about at the end where you can catch some of the mismatches. So if something did get entered in wrong, I overrode what the default was, even though I knew I wasn't supposed to. We've got some reports that will help to catch that. So that's a really short answer, but we'll get into both of those things. Other questions about this?
Can I have you use the keywords again that you used for working out, because it didn't seem to match what's here, you're using different, so I just want to catch those. So like you used costing override, and I believe that's with the orange, but it's not listed there, so.
Yeah, pencil it in where it says period activity pay or one-time payments. It's a costing override on those things.
So can you go through all those tiers, because it seemed like you're
Yeah, you
using
bet.
different verbiage than what's listed, and I just want to make sure I can speak
Oh,
lingo.
thank you for the question. That's excellent. So when I talk about costing overrides, it's on one-time payments or period activity pay. And again, we can demo how this, what this looks like, where you would find that. But we saw there, when I looked at period activity pay and there was that costing overrides, section with the little number on it. So when I'm talking about special comp plans, it would be if I've assigned a costing override to a one-time payment or a period activity pay assignment.
So at the top, sorry, you use, and then you're like, hey, what should we do? I didn't know because I didn't have those keywords that you were.
Yeah, you bet. So on the payroll input, I'd say it's just pay input. And again, this would only be done by the payroll office. So there's nothing that you would do here.
Okay.
It would be something that you'd have them check for you. And really, they would never do it unless you had requested that they do it in the first place. With time tracking, it really is just time tracking and a project someone puts on when they're logging their hours on their timesheet. So I think time tracking is probably the best way to refer to that. But yes, on the special comp plans, we're talking costing overrides on one-time payments or period activity pay. And then here it's in parentheses, but these are both two different types of costing allocations. So this may be a little bit misleading because this is not the position restrictions. This is the costing allocation that's on the position restrictions. And it's a costing allocations that's assigned to that worker position. But both of those, so maybe highlight or put stars or boxes around costing allocation on those two, because that's what we're talking about is the costing allocation. And it's just two different types of costing allocations. And then the default organization assignments, we refer to those as organization assignments. Great question. Thank you. Anything else with any of these kind of concepts, terminology? I really appreciate that question. And we know where to see it. So on the position, we can look up position restrictions. We can look up those default organization assignments. Again, either by looking at, I'm gonna pull Eliza back here, either by looking at that job tab and organizations, or I can also see on pay, if I'm looking for the costing allocations up to the top, I can expand that default organizations view to see them there also. And then with period activity pay, let me just pull that up one more time because we had that question. If I'm looking at compensation and current activity pay, then I can see on this chart again, when I have it on my screen, I can see a lot more. So I'm just gonna shrink it just a little. I can see the costing override. And that's why I use that terminology of a costing override on period activity pay or a one-time payment. That's how it's phrased here. And I can see what the costing override is just by clicking on that, where it has the little number 1. Okay. All right, now into the fun part of our presentation. Why do we have these mismatched? What's the activity doing on that costing allocation where there's a gift or grant? There shouldn't be an activity. What's up with that? This is the problem that we've had. And some cleanup that definitely needs to be done. And it all has to do with inheritance. So let's say we have a position and we've assigned these default org assignments. We did this when we created the position or we've updated since then on the position restrictions, it has these organization assignments. Company of BYU, Fund 01, program, activities there, cost center, great. This is where we have all the positions within our support. Well, what's gonna happen if I say, actually, this one position, I want it paid by a grant instead. This student worker 3, we have an office, research assistant that's going to be paid by this grant. So I have added a costing allocation on the worker position. Great. We'll show you how to get those added in, but you saw where they were. So I go in and I add BYU Fund 02. I create this, put in the cost center and the grant. Now I didn't put an activity in because I don't want an activity, right? I'm paying with the grant. I don't want this associated with an activity. So I'm just gonna leave that field blank. Well, Workday, all of its lovely helpfulness, is gonna say, oh, Molly, you left that blank, which must mean you want the defaults. So it's going to carry up. So it's gonna say company, it's gonna pull that from the costing allocation, same with fund, program, cost center, grant. I can see those are all the same as what I put on that costing allocation. But where on the costing allocation, I left the activity blank, because I didn't want one. Because there is an activity on the default organization assignments, it's going to inherit that activity. And that's gonna cause some problems, because it's gonna say, wait a minute. Clash, that looks like it's meshing, it's the opposite, it's clashing. It's gonna say, wait a minute, that activity, that doesn't work, does not compute. And then you're gonna have John Leatherwood calling you up saying, you've got mismatched work type, this isn't right, this isn't working. We're gonna just keep this worse here, not literally. Okay, so we've got another one, default org assignments. Put in a worker position costing allocation. Then this is a grad assistant, let's say. So I'm putting in period activity pay. So I add period activity pay. Well, I just designate the cost center on that costing override for the period activity pay. And I didn't fill in anything else. Well, what's Workday going to do? Any guesses?
The defaults.
It's gonna inherit the defaults. You're learning already. This is great. Okay, so the company, it pulled it from the default, the fund, program, activity, because I didn't specify what they were. It's gonna inherit all the defaults. Now on the cost center, I did specify what the cost center was, so it's bringing up the right cost center that I wanted. And it's not bringing in the grant because there's no grant on the organization assignments, the default organization assignments. Okay, I feel like you guys are expert. Let's see if we can trip you up a little bit here. Okay, so next scenario, I've got my default org assignments. I've added a costing allocation on the position restrictions. Then I added a costing allocation on the worker position, but I actually left all those fields blank. So it's kind of like I didn't really add some, I mean, I thought about it. Didn't really put it on there. Where is the employee gonna get paid? What am I gonna see for the fund? Is it gonna pull fund 04 or fund 01?
Or
Is it gonna pull the cost center CC 0340 or the cost center CC 10150?
top one.
Okay, how about activity? Is it gonna have no activity or is it gonna have activity 02042? Okay, you're doing it. Lovely. So it's gonna pull, our hierarchy, right? That pyramid. It's gonna say, okay, well, there's not a costing allocation on that worker position because they didn't put anything in on any of those fields. So it's gonna go one level down to the costing allocation on the position restrictions. It's gonna fill in the information that I gave it, but the information I didn't give, it's going to inherit from the default org assignments. Okay, so like the program, because I didn't specify it, it's going up. Activity, I didn't specify, it's going up. Cost center, I did specify, so it's going with what I had on that costing allocation. Yes.
Previous example, where you had worker position fund was 2,
Uh-huh,
and then activity pay wasn't specified, but then the final costing is fund 1.
correct.
Not fund 2.
Good question. Why is it not fund 2? Why did this say fund 1 here at the top and not fund 2? Okay, you gotta speak louder.
Why did it? But it didn't go back.
Because I put one work tag, the cost center, on the period activity pay costing override, saying, oh, you want to override with this cost center. Now let me pull all of the defaults for the stuff you didn't put in from the default org assignments. And because the fund for the default organization assignments is fund 01, that's what's being pulled up. Yes.
Why is there not something at the top that says like error, this cost center does not match this activity?
There are some. So when we go, and I can kind of show you a little bit, there are some validations where some things will fill automatically, but we haven't made Workday smart enough to catch them all. So there are ways to trick it into doing something that's really not supposed to do. Yeah, good question. Okay, other questions? Did that make sense on this one? Why it's pulling that? It's pulling because I've designated a work tag here. It's saying, okay, you wanted to override it. We'll put in your override, but everything else is going to default from the default org assignment. Okay.
But doesn't default down to the next step, it default to the org assignment.
Correct.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for saying that much better than I did. Yes. Okay, on this one, the reason why it did not, why it defaulted back to the costing allocation for the position restriction is because I didn't enter anything. And so it's not thinking there's an override here. Otherwise, if I had entered in a fund here, then it would be pulling all this information from the default org assignments. But because I didn't put anything here at all, it's saying, oh, there's not a worker costing allocation. There's just a position restrictions one. So it's pulling that information plus the defaults for any fields that I didn't have completed. Okay. One more because we just love this. Okay. Make sure, yes, okay. So, oh, we've got two more. So on this one, same kind of thing. I've got the default org assignments. I've got the position restriction costing allocation. I've got the worker costing allocation. And then I've put in a costing override on that period activity pay. So once again, why is the grant not showing up that I had on my costing allocation? Shout it out. Why is there no grant?
Period activity pay overrode it.
Okay, the period activity pay costing override overrode it. And because there's no grant on organization assignments, you can't put a grant on organization assignments. It's not pulling a grant up. How come it's giving me activities 02042?
It's the default.
It's the default because I didn't specify one on my costing override. It's saying, well, then what's the default? Let me fill that in for you and be so helpful. Okay, yes, question.
So when we're entering a period activity pay and it shows us the costing allocation, will that be the latest and greatest? Or do we need to go deep dive and say, what's the default? Is there any position every single time? Will that period activity pay say the latest? Kind of override.
Really good question. We'll show this. What it's going to show when you go to enter in that period activity pay off to the left, it's going to show what the defaults are. It's going to show the default organization assignments. So if I'm going to enter an override, then I'm going to know what elements I'm overriding. If I do not enter an override, then it's probably worth me double checking to see if there's a costing allocation because it's going to fund from it. Okay, that's a great question. Okay. One more. We set up this position. On the default org assignments, we filled in every last thing we could. BYU, Fund 04, program, activity, a cost center, a class. I even put an experiential learning and an assignee. We are set. Lovely. If this is all there was, no problems. No problemo. But I decided to put in a costing allocation. Enter some problemos. Okay, what's going to happen now that I have this costing allocation where I did not indicate what the activity was? I didn't indicate a class. I didn't indicate an experiential learning or an assignee. What's going to happen with those four fields right there?
Default.
It's going to inherit them from that. You're like Molly, I got it. Broken record here is going to inherit it from the default. So the things I designated like grant are going to show up, but so is that experiential learning. So is that activity. those things that were part of the default. So what's the solution here? How do I fix this now? I've got an activity where I don't want an activity. How do I correct this situation?
Tell us, please.
Help! How do I do it?
Delete it in the default settings.
Okay. Alan, star student,
Oh,
I'm gonna,
that sounds
I'm gonna
You're no.
if I don't want an activity. Because I put in a costing allocation that had no activity, then why the heck do I have, sorry, if I was.
Sheesh.
Do I have activity on the default org assignments to begin with? So I'm just gonna go ahead, what I should do before I put in this costing allocation, I'm gonna go in and edit the org assignments and get rid of that activity. If I get rid of that activity, then it's not gonna get inherited because it won't be part of that default org assignment. So that's really where we would say, hey, on those default org assignments, we're best going bare bones on those. If I wanna add, if I know I'm putting in a costing allocation, then just add the class on the costing allocation, add the assignee, add those things onto the costing allocation. Don't have them be in the default org assignments, or it will get inherited up. Now, there's gonna be some who say, but Molly, I need the activity on the position. Because let's say this grant only goes until September 30th. And then what's gonna happen? After September 30th, where does this position figure out how to get paid?
Default.
It's gonna go back to the default, right? So once this costing allocation has ended, it's like it's not even there. It's gonna go back to this default. Well, if I don't have that activity on the default, Molly, then what do? Because I need the activity there so that when the grant ends, it gets paid by that activity. Now, there's two ways to do this. One is I can enter in a dummy activity into my costing allocation of AC 10,000. It's a dummy one that doesn't really mean anything, but it will override any activity that's being inherited. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it would be something like this. So I'm gonna put the activity on the position restriction costing allocation. So once my grant runs out that I've put on the worker costing allocation, then remember our hierarchy, the next thing down is gonna go to that position restriction costing allocation. And I've got the activity on that. And this is the one that's gonna carry over from person to person. So I'm gonna be safe that way. So there's really two ways I can address that. I could use the dummy activity. John Leatherwood's gonna say that is not the preferred method. Preferred would be add this position restriction costing allocation so it can default to that once my worker position costing allocation is ended. Okay. You feel like we're getting this? Questions, please.
Sorry, I'm really slow.
Nope, ask away.
I don't quite understand. Can you use another example why you would need to use the dummy activity for the default?
Yes. Great question. Okay, so if I have a situation like this, where I have the default org assignment has activity 5753, and I say, you say, I can't get rid of that. Terry, I have to have that activity on there because this costing allocation is not permanent. And when the costing allocation goes away with the worker or the grant end date comes up, I need the position to be paid by an activity. So I want the activity on my default org assignment. But if I don't have an activity on the costing allocation, which I don't want because the costing allocation is the grant, it's going to inherit the activity. So my way to get it to not inherit activity 05753 is to put in activity 10,000, and then up here at the top, it's gonna be activity 10,000.
So you're putting the dummy activity in that worker costing allocation.
Yep, exactly.
Cause I understood it as at the very bottom. in
No,
the-
yes, thank you for clarifying. This is where I would put that dummy activity code to override the default. Again, preference would be get rid of the activity from the default assignments and then it's not getting inherited if you don't need it. If I do need it, an alternate solution to that dummy activity would be, okay, let me put the activity in on a costing allocation on the position restrictions. And that would be another solution I could explore. Other questions? I feel like maybe there was one, yeah.
So in that example, when you ended up with an activity and grant on the top row,
Mhm.
where does the payroll get charged to?
Okay, payroll, it's gonna go to this grant, Fund 05.
But when you have an activity, there's.
Oh, so if I have an activity coming up here,
Yeah.
it's still gonna go to the, I'm looking for my finance people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why you'd wanna use activity 10,000. If you used an activity for a faculty consolidated account and a grant, it's gonna post as an expense in both of those places. And you're gonna think you spent money on their faculty consolidated activity and the grant. So ideally, you don't use the activity at all, you do it this way. But if you need to override the activity, if you use activity 10,000, because that's a dummy activity, it's not gonna charge anybody's activity, it will just charge the grant.
But
But if you do it.
I can say though, the problem with doing that is it creates a new custom word tag. So you're it combines the two. So if you're running it by your default word tag, you'll have a grant and activity put together as one default word tag. And so that's when you start to pivot your reports, none of them make sense if you use a default, if you use the dummy account.
This is the better way.
So yes, getting rid of it's better.
Is this the better way or is it the only way we should do it? No, it's a real question.
Like the only.
That sounds like a reporting.
Issue, it's a data input issue.
You put in the activity.
Moving back and forth, having to go, okay, I have to change it out of the cost allocation. Now I have to go back and change the org assignment. Now I have to go back and do a worker. That is a lot of work back and forth. And again, a dummy might be the easier way to it without having to do multiple steps to hire somebody.
The problem with the dummy that I don't like is that it does show up on the report as AC 10,000. Now they'll just add extra lines to the report where you have expenses for that grant in more than one line. So.
And
it adds to don't work well, I'll do my best.
I'm gonna table that and say, that sounds like an excellent topic for your controller, finance business partner
This
meeting.
is not a controller issue. That's kind of my view on this. We have to work together or we're going to continue to have a mess. I'm speaking very directly, but we've been dealing with this for 8 months. We've got to work together.
Yeah.
So I understand, Lisa, that's a great point. We need to get some clearer guidance, but I think there should be one way to do it. Let's take that piece offline, but this is
Yeah.
not to be resolved by the controllers because most of us can't see any of these screens.
And it's the HR users that are doing it. Right?
Yes,
The
it's
ops specialists are the
it's
ones
gonna be your HR
doing most of
people
the work.
putting it in.
And so we need to understand how it affects everything, but we also should, can't fix the report, so it shows up and that's just the way it is, it's fine. But I would like to consider how is this affecting the user when they're having to do the work and remembering what tasks they have to do to make sure it gets paid correctly.
Yeah, and I would say to your point, Lisa, too, I've noticed on like one-time payments, if the default org assignments for a one-time payment have an activity, then when I go to put in that costing override, I have to put in an activity.
Yes.
And I wouldn't want to take the activity off of the default org assignments, just for this one-time payment that might be an award coming from a totally different department. So I don't want to create an activity under compensation just to pay this one award. But I still need to override it or I can't submit the one-time payment. So those are all kind of complex issues I think we're gonna have to
I
talk
don't know what
about.
the answer is, I just
Yeah.
know that we need to consider a user that's hiring lots of people when we decide.
Yeah, Terry.
Well, and I'd also add to that, what about faculty who are doing their own hiring? There's no way that they will understand, like, I mean, they'll understand because they're smart, but like. This is so difficult of a concept, and this isn't their job. Like, so like, how do we also help the faculty who are trying to hire and then who's responsible over, you know, fixing their mistakes or, you know, so it's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. And I'd say that's where a really good HRVP like you comes into play of providing education to faculty and monitoring, right? There's gonna be likely some mistakes. And that's where I think some of the reporting that we have available now will help to catch these hopefully before they become problematic.
Paul, this isn't a problem-solving meeting, correct?
Yes, correct.
But I would like to put forward, could we change a business process so that this gets reviewed by a knowledgeable person before it goes live?
It currently is, it is currently reviewed by the COEs, it is currently reviewed by hiring offices. When you enter a costing allocation, it goes to an approval to Martin.
Yeah, we're not gonna solve it. I don't know if we've got the approval in the right place. If we did, we wouldn't have the magnitude of the issues that we do. So let's just,
Yeah.
it's nice to know that there is that business process. I think it might need to be revised.
Excellent. Yeah, I would say, speaking from a staff hiring office perspective, I can say, oh, they're using this fund, which they shouldn't be because of the type of position that it is. We're gonna kick that one back and say, that's not correct, send it back. But I can see our student hiring office, if you say it needs to be paid from this grant, they're not gonna know whether or not that's the right grant. I mean, they wouldn't know. They would say, oh, if that's the grant they want, then sounds good to me. So I'm with you on that. There may be some more discussion of, do we need an extra approval step somewhere? Okay. Let's go back to our demo here and kind of show how we would add a costing allocation, how we change costing allocations, how we add in. So let's use our friend. We kind of did this already, but if I were to go to, I'm back here on Eliza, right? If I'm going to enter in a contract for someone, how do I do it? Okay, actions, then what? Right, it's on my short menu here because I have it, but if it wasn't, I'd go to compensation and then manage period activity pay assignment. I could also type manage period activity pay assignments into that search bar, and then it would ask me what employee I want, and I could enter it in that way. I'm just gonna quickly put one in here. We're gonna make it effective this date. I'm gonna say this is for the academic period 2025. Let's make this fall. I'm gonna go to the period activity pay. This is where I'm gonna enter in all the information about it. This is an additional assignment. I'm speeding through those that do period activity pay. This can be very familiar. I just want to get to this. It's showing me existing period activity pay. I want to add a new one. I'm gonna put that this is let's do supplemental just to be fun. This is adjunct supplemental. I'm gonna put in a comment because it's required. I'm gonna have my start date. I'm gonna have my end date. I'm just picking something arbitrarily here. I'm gonna have hours. I'm gonna have my total amount. And here's where that costing override is. So if I'm wanting to override the costing allocations if they exist, and I'm wanting to override the default org assignments if there isn't a costing allocation, this is where I would put it in. So here you can see, this is the default on the position. It's not going to be the default from the costing allocations. It's going to say this is the default on the position. So if I go to put in a new cost center. Let's just say. See what I can come up with the McKay School. Oh, it's just gonna give me that one still. Okay. You'll notice when I put in a cost center here, it disappeared from this list over here on the left. That's basically saying, okay, instead of what you had as the default, you've put something in. If I were to put in a different activity, you'll see the default over here. If I don't put in an activity, what's gonna be the default? This. So if I say, let's go, I don't know. I feel like I was putting in Courtney's name on something and something came up. I'm gonna put in that activity. It's from the law school. I wouldn't do that. Did you see what happened? Okay, so I put in that activity, it changed the cost center. So this is where Workday's helping you out. Okay, it's saying, hey, the cost center you had originally doesn't jive with that activity. So when I put in a different activity, it fixed the cost center for me.
If you scroll over below and fix the fund.
Yes, so this is defaulting from that. Now what happens, I'm gonna put in, hey, I really did want the McKay School. It's not even giving that to me as an option because the McKay School doesn't have this activity. So Workday is trying to help you out a little bit with some validations here. But let's say I keep the law school. This is supplemental, so maybe this adjunct is doing a supplemental assignment for the law school. And I say, but I don't really want that to come from Fund 01. Let's go with a different fund. I'm gonna choose Fund 02. Well, it let me.
Wow.
So it's gonna let me override the default. That's where I'd say, hey, if I'm changing these things, just X out of everything in that additional work tax and re-enter it in. And when I re-enter in my law school activity,
Well, you need to delete the cost center too.
it's going to, it will automatically fix it for me. Yeah, it's good to exit all of them. I thank you for saying that. It's good to exit all of them.
Up on that one right here is if you put in that activity at the cost center and you decided that you didn't want the activity anymore and you just deleted the activity, that cost center may have the wrong funded program code unless you re-enter it. So that's back to best practice. If you're like, oh, I changed my mind, delete everything.
Exit everything out.
Re-enter the driver.
Re-enter.
Yeah.
So we don't end up with those mismatched work tags. Amy.
So situation, let's say that you don't want an activity, that you just want to pay this supplemental fee directly from a cost center. If there's an activity in the default work tags.
Yep, because there's an activity in the default work tags. I have to have an activity here or potentially could use a W, but I didn't want to suggest that now. But yes, the activity will carry forward. So I would say, oh, if I'm putting in override, if it doesn't have an activity, that doesn't need an activity, can I delete the activity from the default organizations? And if not, then maybe I can enter in a costing allocation that has an activity and a costing allocation on the work or that does not, so I can kind of solve this problem. Yeah.
Well, best practice might be to not ever put an activity to get grants. At the default.
In the default of one that you may be paying with the grants, yeah. Excellent, okay?
You could set up just is what Molly's given us. Set up the default works, bare bones, position restriction of the activity, and then the period activity pay or the position allocation with the grant. And then when the grant goes away, it'll override on the position restriction instead, and it won't pull the activity through the default organizations.
One example.
Yeah, that very last example we showed.
Consolidated, yeah.
Okay, as far as how to enter in a costing allocation. How do I do that?
Line costing allocation.
Okay, I can do it a couple different ways because Workday is really great. But I can go to assign costing allocation as a task. I can also, I'm just gonna throw this in so you can kind of see it. So there's my task, assign costing allocation. I can also go to a person. So I could go to, let's see who's, let's go back to my friend Rick here.
Molly, can I interrupt just for a second?
Of course,
Assigning a costing allocation does not change the default, correct?
it will not change the default
Okay.
organization assignments.
Right.
It will override them if you put in the work text to override. If you
Right.
don't, then it's gonna inherit up.
And you can say for a specific time frame that you're assigning the
Yes.
costing allocation.
So let's see who I've got in Rick's. Where I can mess around with a little bit. So let's find someone. So Katie, has costing allocations because I put them on her. But if I wanted to add a costing allocation, I could go to this pay tab. If I need to, in fact, let's do two things, sorry. Let's change one. So if someone has an existing costing allocation, let's say on this one, hey, this worker position one is set to end in February of 2026. I actually want that to end in February of 2025. So I want to edit this one. I'm going to click on that maintain button. And I think good practice is to get rid of this date that's going to default in the existing allocations because I want to just see everything that's there. But I know on this one, it is, I should shrink that. This one is a worker costing allocation that I want to edit. If I wanted to edit the costing allocation on the position restrictions, I need to X this out. And I need to add it down below in this position restriction costing allocation section. So be aware when you're adding a costing allocation, depending on, do I want it only on the worker or do I want it on that underlying seat, the position? I'm going to either enter information in this worker section or I'm going to enter it down here in the position restriction section. On this, let me just show you here. So this is if I want to change the position restriction costing allocation. In this case, though, don't. I actually do want to change it on the worker because that was the one that ends on February, whatever the date was. So I'm going to type Katie back here. I can see her in this worker costing section. And it's going to pull up the existing costing allocation. Now, if I say, you know what, actually, I don't even want this costing allocation here at all. I'm going to end it as of this pay period. Good practice. I'm preaching to the choir with HR and finance people. Good practice. Use the beginning and end of pay periods, right? So if the pay period is ending on September 13th, is that what our new, this one?
Start date.
Yes, thank you. So this
Put in a
one,
plug for
thank you.
grants. Grants sometimes end in the middle of a pay period.
Yes.
And
Yes, you gotta do what you gotta do with grants.
Sorry.
But if it's something else, you can choose a different date. Go with their next default down would be the beginning or end of pay period. So I'm going to say February, September, I'm gonna end it. Let's end it here. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna end it and then I'm gonna add a new one. And this new costing allocation, I'm gonna have started, it's giving me an error because it's saying, hey, you've got a gap there. Let's put in, I ended that one on 12th. Let's start this one on the 13th. I'm not even gonna put in an end date, just to kind of show, here's the costing allocation. So again, I'm seeing the defaults entered in here. If I enter in just a cost center, and that's the only thing I enter in, different. Keep picking on the law school, even though this is not one I would do. It's gonna default, this class location, that's gonna default. So it's telling me, hey, you may want to enter in some other information here so that it doesn't inherit that from the default. So I'm gonna enter in, and I would say, enter in as many, if I put in a gift or a grant. I'm just picking a random gift. If I put that in, you'll see the cost centers automatically populating. It's trying to help me out. Here's the fund, here's the program. It's still gonna inherit that class. Am I okay with that? If the answer is no, then I may want to go in and change the organization assignments and get rid of the class. Otherwise, that's gonna inherit us. Okay, so I've entered that in 100%. I can also override it. So notice it had that class in the default section. If I choose a different class, let's say, oh, I'm just putting in random words because I'm gonna go with that class. Then I'm gonna notice the class has disappeared from this default. So it's gonna say, hey, I don't have to inherit the default anymore. You filled in that field and it's going to override the default. So I would say if you have a default here, and I'm ready to hit submit and it's still sitting here like general campus, I really need to ask myself, am I okay with that default being inherited? And if the answer is no, then I probably need to make a change to the organization assignments or to those default organization assignments, or consider a costing allocation on the worker position or on the position restrictions that will allow that to not default when I add this costing allocation. Okay, questions about adding, changing a costing allocation? This is how I'm doing it. I would end a current one, I would add a new one with the elements I want. Let me go to this position. I'm picking on Katie. Let me cancel out of this. So I saw there was a class on Katie. I'm saying, I don't want that class to be inherited up. How do I change the default organization assignments? Got our HR people here. You don't know this. What is it? Change organization assignments. Now I can type change organization assignment and I can go through that way. It will give me a task. I would highly recommend not doing that. If you're only changing it for a single person. If I need to change the organizational assignments for multiple positions, that's the way to go. But if I'm just changing it for Katie, the better way to do it is to go to actions and come down to organization and change organization assignments. The reason I say that is if I do it this way, where I go from the actions and organization and change organization assignments, it will give me some of the defaults when I go to make the entries. If I do it the other way as a standalone task, it doesn't pre-fill the defaults for me. Workday people, ESG can probably tell you why that is. I don't love it. So I would say if you're only changing it on a single person or just a few people, go from the profile page, actions, organization, change organization assignments. So I'm going to do it for Katie. We're going to go back to the beginning of pay period. I'm going to say, okay. And then it's going to give me what the current organization assignments are. I'm going to say, I don't want that class there. It's going to keep following through to everything that I do. I'm just going to eliminate that. I'm going to put a comment in here. Deleted class that was I can't see what I'm typing. I'm still in here and I'd hit submit. So easy to change the org assignments. And then once I've changed those organization assignments, and that has been approved, Then when I go in and do the costing allocation, I'm not gonna see that default there anymore because I've removed it from those default organization assignments. Okay, yes, question.
How do you fix it if default, you're doing the costing allocation task and it shows default and it shows an activity there and then you go and use exchange organization assignment tasks and the activity isn't showing there.
Yeah,
What do you do with that?
let me give you some best practice tips. So let me come back here. Oh man, see, I knew we were gonna run out of time. Holy crap. Okay. Let me give you just a couple of tips here. We do have some screenshots in the presentation talking about how to see those costing allocations, how to edit the costing allocations. I'm just gonna breeze through this because we talked it over. Start and end dates. Choose start and end dates for pay periods if you can. On grants, you gotta go with what the dates are. When you're adding a costing allocation, fill in every field you possibly can, especially if you want to override those defaults. That's just probably best practice. And then, if all the work tags that you need are showing up in the default, then you don't even need the costing allocation, right? Don't put in costing allocations for the fun of it. It's just more work. If it's not split funding, I'm not adding a gift grant or project, probably don't even need the costing allocation. So that's the reminder there. Couple other tips to get at what Terry just mentioned. We talked about effective date, start and end. So we've had some problems where people thought they could just hit, I don't know if there was a garbage can or a minus sign on the costing allocation, but it didn't really. Don't do that. Just end the costing allocation, create a new one if you need it. Reviewing costing allocations and period activity pay after organization changes. This is another best practice, and this is what Terry's getting at. If you change the organization assignments and the costing allocation I put in 2 weeks ago that had the old defaults is still there, it's gonna show those old defaults. So it's worth, if you're going in and changing the organization assignments on a position, go look at your costing allocations also to see if they need to be updated. There's a good chance they might. Or there might be a chance if I change the org assignments, I don't even need the costing allocation anymore. So it's really good practice. If you're looking at changing the organization assignments, those defaults, double checking to see if this is a position that has a costing allocation and what those org assignment changes, how that will impact the costing allocations. Okay, a good tip. Again, we talked about this in every case. Populate the work tags if you can, all of them. Don't just think, okay, well, I don't need an assignment, or an activity, I don't want an activity, so I'm just gonna leave it blank. Be cognizant of what the defaults are that will get inherited. So if you can put in something to override it, if there's a class that makes more sense than what the default class is, override that, or consider whether that should really be on the organization assignments to begin with. Not changing work tags, we talked about this too. If I change the work tags after, oh, I want this one. No, I don't. I want that one. No, I don't. I want this. The fund isn't always going to get updated, and then I've got mismatched work tags. That's problematic. Exit everything out on those costing allocations and then put back in the activity or the cost center that you are wanting so that the correct defaults will be put in. And then this last one on grant costing allocations, we mentioned the grant can't extend beyond the date of the actual grant. There is a report, BYU All Grants, that will show you what the end date of that grant or award is. Your costing allocation shouldn't extend beyond that. Right? Okay, we promised reports. There are reports that will help you. I'm not going to guarantee who has what security to run this. I know the HR business partners can run this BYU position costing allocations report. If you run it, you are welcome to share it with your finance business partner so they have this information also. Let me just show you really quick what that looks like. I'm not gonna, well, let me show you how to find it and run it. So It's the BYU position, costing, allocation. I'm gonna see it listed in my reports. This one right here, BYU position costing allocations. I click on that. I can choose what group I want to see. You know, who's the who's the dean of the McKay School? Sarah Clark, thank you. Okay, Sarah Clark. Okay, I'm gonna choose Sarah Clark, Dean, that's the soup org. I wanna see everybody within that soup org. I can choose if I only wanna see students or staff or faculty. I can choose everybody. If I just wanna look up a costing allocation on a single person, I can do that here too. I can say whether I wanna see only current ones or ones that have been input for the future. I can say what type of position I wanna see this for, and I can run the report. Not gonna do that because this is a report that's pulling so much information from different places. It takes a little while to run it. But I did run it on a single person. My friend. Oh, this one I still have it. Yes. Okay, so I ran it on my friend Katie Brown. This is what the report will look like. So if you were running it for all support, all the positions would be listed there. I just ran it on a single person just to demonstrate. Gives me information on her. All of this information that's showing up here. It's dummy information, doesn't really make $13.13. It's gonna show me the default org assignments first. That's what this is. The cost center, the fund, the program, the class. Those are all the default org assignments. And then it's going to show me if there is a costing allocation on the position restrictions. It will show me what the work tags are associated with that costing allocation on the position restrictions. I can see in this case, it's a Fund 20. I'm having it come from a gift, Simmons Cancer Center. Then I can also see if there's a costing allocation on the worker positions, it's gonna show up here also. So I can see on the worker position, which is gonna trump the position restrictions, right? I can see, I've actually got this grant coming from Fund 05 on this position. And then if this were a period activity pay position, I'd see another set of columns, the same kind of thing, that would show me those costing overrides on the period activity pay. So this is a really useful report, yes.
Can I just highlight one of the best parts is trying for this costing allocation indicated. So you can pull this report and see when all your costing allocations for this did. So
right there.
So you can check to see, oh my gosh, this grant is going away next week. So you're really going.
Excellent story. Thank you. Yes. And I feel like a little clap for Alyssa because I know when they were developing this report, they talked to her to do some of the testing. They're like, what area has a lot of costing allocations? Ask Alyssa. So thank you. Yes, having an end date here, that's an excellent point. Makes this report useful for seeing that and knowing, oh my goodness, this is ending on February 28th. So where's it gonna get paid after that? Well, if there's a position restriction costing allocation, well, now I can see where it's going after that. If that needs to be corrected, I can correct it. If I can get rid of that and I really want it to go to where the default organization assignments are, I can see what those are too. Okay. All right, with all 4 minutes that I've left you, John Leatherwood.
Hey, that's great.
I
I don't know what we're gonna do, John, we've got 4 minutes. But this is good, I'm glad Molly took a lot of time because she's a great presenter, I mean, that was good information, I hope everybody has seen it. So it's gonna be really needed.
Yeah, I kind of showed you on you're probably the very last tab, this reports. That you? Oh, okay. Let's see if we can get out. On that sheet, there were two when I said the BYU positions costing allocation report. It can be run by your HRBPs. That other report, the Johnston Club, is one that the finance people can pull up, but your HRBPs would have to get security access to do it.
Yeah, so just real quick, so we've just created a new report, which is pretty similar to our other payroll detail report. Just has some minor tweaks to it, but they're actually really helpful. And we just want to make sure you understand what the nuances there are. So we've renamed this report to be called BYU All Payroll Detail by Workday. So this will include all monthly and bi-weekly payrolls. I've just made a request to our report writer to add HR business partners to this report. If you have access to this report, you would still need to be added as an analyst in your cost center hierarchy for that to work. So there's kind of two components, right? So the finance business partners can give the HR business partners access to it by adding them as a financial analyst. But what we've done is we've actually included, before this payroll detail report only included the payroll journal sources. So it only included payroll data. We've now meshed this with any other journals that have hit the 5,000 ledger account. And so you can see here, we have this journal source JE override. So you'll see on these lines right here, there's no payroll. It's not assigned to a worker, but you'll see amounts and you'll see a journal memo and a line memo. So what this does is this gives you the ability to do a journal entry to fix payroll issues and have it show up on this report. So that whatever you put in the line memo field will show up on here. And so hopefully that's helpful. What we've also done is we've reorganized these columns. So hopefully the basic information is to the left and it's sorting by left to right. And then once you get to employee, it'll sort by date so that all the employees' wages are in there by date. So hopefully it just makes it a little cleaner for that way. The other areas of this report, we've grouped kind of the other driver work tags over here. And then there's more payroll information as you go over. And so we don't anticipate you using this area to the right as much. So we think most people will use this area at the left. So we put that basic information there. Craig, do you want to talk about your reports?
Yeah, if you guys can hang in there just a few more minutes. I mean, this is a lot of information at once here. So the report that Molly demonstrated here, all the costing allocations, this is just a little summary of what's out in the system. So if you looked at all the organization defaults assigned to positions in the system, there's 87,000 of them, right? 55,000 of them are unfilled. There's probably some of those that are open now that need to be closed, right? That's something that needs to be worked on. But you can see there's 32,000 filled positions in the system. Of those organizations that are in the system, if you look at the position restriction allocation, costing allocations, we've got about 6,200 of them in the system. 3,400 of them are filled, 2,700 of them are open. Then you can see there the numbers for the worker position costing allocations and the period activity pay. But this is totally university, right? So if you run this report just for your soup org, you're going to see your individual number. Okay. So there's some other reports here. Let me bounce back to. All right.
I think it's under Chrome, but just a different.
Those 4 reports at the bottom will help you try to find problems in the system. This isn't going to find all problems. It's not going to correct if you've put costing allocations in incorrectly. Different things are inheriting. What it's going to try to find is if there's incorrect related work tags that have come through. And it'll help identify those grants or gifts where an activities come through that you don't want, okay? Switch back here real quick. We'll walk through just one of these here, maybe two. So this particular report here is looking at organization, work tags. Once again, put in your supervisory organization, check the include subordinate organizations. That box should automatically be checked. Don't uncheck it. And the report's going to run as of today's date, right? If you change that date, it'll show different information if you try to go back history. So on this particular report, here's the position, here's some information. This one happens to be unfilled, right? There's no employee name in here. Here's the organization assignments. And these columns here, the report, when you run it, it won't have the green highlighting. I just put that there so it'd be helpful in this demonstration. But it looks like it's got a wrong program code. The related program code is wrong. Here's what the default organization shows. You can see the program code's 1100 versus the 3100. So you need to go into the system and update that organization. That makes sense? So you can see there's some others. If we were to scroll down, it's hard where we've got so much. There's such a small screen here. Got a filter. You can see this line here. It's got an incorrect fund and program code. Okay. So that was the first report here, one on organizations. The second one here is on the position restrictions. And these reports do look a little bit different. Here's the output on one of those. Once again, information here about the position or the worker. Here's the organization work tags in yellow. Then what you want to look for on the right here is anytime you see a column that says like a gift mismatch, true or false, or an activity mismatch, true or false, or a cost center. That's identifying certain lines. So this activity right here has an incorrect cost center associated with it. This is the correct one, CC 10100. Okay, so these reports are basically helping those with those related work tags. Let me go back to the filter real quick. The incorrect related work tags is this first checkbox. If you check the second checkbox, grant and gift and grant and activity populated. What this is going to try to do is it'll show any organization assignments with an activity and any costing allocations with an activity. So you can make that connection of whether or not you need to delete it in that organization so it doesn't keep flowing through. So it looks like this person for the gift did the best they could right here. They put that AC 10,000, right? But as we talked, the better solution probably would be to delete the activity out of the organization. Makes sense.
And who's making these changes? Is this the HR business partners, finance?
Right, so HR, finance, business partners need to sit down together. This big report that Molly demonstrated.
Yeah.
Well, let me backstep one more. I mean, everything we're demoing was employee by employee. And so how do you see everything? So you basically run that costing, the BYU, what was it again? Positions costing allocation report. Then you see your whole college, right? You look at the payroll report that John demoed. If you see things that are, doing incorrect payroll, then you've got to go back to that costing allocation report, look at the inheritance, what's overriding what, and make changes.
And yes, it would be your HR business partner or your operations center people that would make those corrections. So if finance sees something that's off, you're running one of those reports that Craig just mentioned, and you're seeing that mismatch, then you're gonna say, okay, well, is it the activity that's wrong, or is it the cost center that's wrong? What's the correct one? We need to get that corrected. You would go in and change, you would complete that change organization, assignments task, if you're changing it on the default organization assignments, or if you need to update the costing allocation, you'd go in, so it's gonna be your HR people to make those changes.
Right, I mean, our report can't tell whether you put in the right driver work tag or not, right? I mean,
But what we hope to do as well is have a central university accountant run these. And then email you and notify you, hey, you know, like these, we email both the business part, the finance and HR business partner will say, hey, we got these costing allocations that are wrong, you know. And that will help alert you
And I
as well.
can say with that though, just to reinforce it, you've got to work together because the HR person is gonna make the changes. But I've had multiple cases where an HR business partner said, I don't know, what cost center am I supposed to use?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know, talk to your finance business partner.
So we'll
They're gonna
email
let
both
you know,
of you.
so, yeah, work together on what the correct work tag should be. If you don't know that, your finance person should know that, even if you're the one who then has to make the updates.
Stephanie.
So then, if she runs it, our HR partner runs it today and then makes all these changes, but that would only make it effective as of the date that she changes, which would be like the current pay period. So then I'd still have to go back and do journal entries to correct everything that was wrong in the past, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point too. We'll talk tomorrow about how to correct some of these, because if you have an incorrect fund, the system's gonna say, hey, you can't do this entry. And so we'll talk tomorrow on what the process will be to fix these.
So with the costing allocations, do the benefits associated with the savings get allocated as well?
so not, for the sake of time, I won't show the other two reports because they have the same format here as this one, but there is kind of a summary I put together here. If you run the position organization detail mismatch report, there's actually 2,500 open positions that don't actually even have a cost center on them, which that's a little odd, right? So they need to be looked into.
And all, this isn't always, somebody messed up somewhere. Some of this, when we did the data migration from PeopleSoft to Workday, it entered in some things that weren't always great. So I will say, we found a lot of things, we kind of glossed over this, but a lot of costing allocations were added that were not necessary because it wasn't a gift grant, or it was basically duplicating what was on the default org assignments, so that you didn't even need the costing allocation. That just got imported in from that data migration. So it's not like anyone went in and added the costing allocation that wasn't needed. It just came over that way when we did that data migration. So now it's just doing some cleanup. And actually those, bless our ESG friends, identified the ones that where all the entries for the costing allocation and the default org assignments were the same. And so they just went in and did a mass update and ended all of those costing allocations. So if you see some costing allocations that are ended and you think, I didn't do that, it's likely that it was part of that mass update where we just ended ones that were duplicating what was already on the organization assignment.
So we did that this past weekend. There were 17,000 of them. We updated them as of August 30th. Stephanie?
So this will be a one-time cleanup and then this will be an ongoing thing as more mistakes are created.
Hopefully not much shows up now that you guys are more expert in setting these up, right? Then we correct them, so ongoing, we're good, but yeah, we gotta run these, especially before a payroll run, right? And clean them up before the payroll run.
Yeah, our goal will be to either run it regularly. We don't know what that timeframe looks like, but we'll run those and then stay on top of making sure these are clean.
And that's really our last slide here. Well, John, if you want to say any more about steps here, just.
We'll talk more tomorrow about how to correct these, the items in the past. I've just done a major correction on several things and, yeah, that's pretty much all we have. Thank you for coming.
You want me to chat with you? Good training. You want me to sit, I know.